Morning, everyone. David Aragona and Craig Milkowski are taking a look at one of the stakes events on Saturday at Oaklawn Park. Race 9 is the Mistletoe Stakes. This one going the 1 mile distance with the short stretch run for the fillies and mares. And Craig, we've got a field of 11 signed on, horses that have some questions to answer, some moving down in class, some moving up in class, and there is quite a bit of speed in this race. So I think these horses are going to have quite a scramble in the short run to that first turn.
Yeah, as you note, it's a big field, and at just a mile distance, they use that alternate finish line, which is usually the 16th pole for other races. So, yeah, it's a race where you need to get some forward position.
Haven't yet seen the morning line for this race and really not sure exactly where the bettors are supposed to go in here. I suppose a horse like the number 2, Misty Vale, could take some money. She's the one that I was referencing who's dropping in class out of some graded stakes races. You'll also notice, just scanning through the field of this race, that a couple of Robertino or former Robertino Diodoro horses are named under a different trainer. He is serving a suspension. So the number 4, Lovely Ride, and the number 9, Adeline Julia, are racing for trainer Sean Williams. Just something to note about this field. And let's take a look at the Timeform US Pace Protector, Craig, because I think both of those former Diodoro trainees possess early speed, and it feels like something's going to have to give on the front end because these two stablemates both want to get forward and secure the front end, and I'm not sure that either one is going to have an easy time doing it.
No, for sure. There's plenty of speed signed on here. It's not going to be easy. Lovely Ride won this race last year, but under much different circumstances. She was able to get out, set a clear lead in a slow pace, and I think I should say a moderate pace, but I have trouble envisioning that scenario here.
Yeah, the number 9, Adeline Julia, who's shown on the front end, she's probably the one in that first phalanx of runners that would be content to sit just off the pace. She's been more of a stalker, albeit in sprint races in prior starts. Lovely Ride definitely does her best racing on the front end. You could say the same about the number 6, Coastal Charm, who's shown just off the pace. And even the number 7, Effortlessly Elegant, does her best racing on the front end. So it would not be surprising if something has to give towards the front end in this race. Let's go through the field in post position order, beginning with the number 1, Big Bad Diva. And she was beaten by a couple of these two back in the Iowa Distaff at Prairie Meadows. Both Coastal Charm and Ice Orchid finished ahead of her that day. Was beaten by today's rival Butterbean 4 starts ago, and just feels like a horse that would have to find a level of performance that she hasn't yet achieved to be competitive with this field coming off the layoff.
She's a very consistent mare, but unfortunately for her, it's consistently not fast enough for this race. This is a race we have a 110 Timeform US race rating. She's never really come particularly close to that, especially on dirt.
Now, the number 2, Misty Vale, I could consider her the horse to beat in this race, Craig, just based on her overall body of recent speed figures. She's run plenty of numbers that make her a little bit faster than her rivals in here, but those are primarily come against tougher graded stakes races or tougher competition, and it's not like she's been super competitive in those races. You could almost argue she's been carried along a little bit by some superior horses, but she does have those classy form lines, and she's coming in here. This is the horse that doesn't necessarily need to be forwardly placed. She can close a little bit. So she does make quite a bit of sense, and she drew well towards the inside.
She does, and I noted a couple things when I was looking at her PPs. First was 2 of her last 3 races came over tracks we have coded in bright red as highly speed favoring, which isn't to her advantage. And also both of those races had slow paces with blue fractions, much better horses in there than what she sees in here. So she's clearly the horse to beat.
Yeah, she's coming out of that race won by Kijera, who is a really talented 3-year-old filly. I know we discussed that speed figure a little bit, Craig, a race that got a bit of a pace upgrade from Timeform US, and she was beaten by 2nd and 3rd place finishers that I think would be tough to make a case for in here, but as you said, bit of a merry-go-round affair, and she was against the pace that day. The number 3 is Charlize, and she is a horse that's just coming off a maiden victory at Louisiana Downs, facing a field that was far inferior to the one that she'll be stepping up against here, and just a horse that seems pretty overmatched at this level.
Yeah, I mean, she is just a 3-year-old. Her speed figures are lacking. She'd need a big jump up. Over probably 20 points. That's a bit of a stretch when you're looking for some improvement. Seems like they could have found a more logical spot for this filly.
The number 4 is Lovely Ride, who, as Craig pointed out, actually won this race last year, and she was in the midst of a great run of form at that time, winning 2 stakes in a row, following it up with the Pippin and narrowly losing to future Grade 1 winner Amore in the Bayakoa. Kind of went off form a little bit after that, had a turf experiment in her most recent start back in May, and they put her on the shelf for a little bit. Now she's coming back off the layoff here, obviously going out for the assistant to Robertino Diodoro in name, and a horse that really has done her best running when she's on the front end, and not exactly sure that she possesses the speed to get in front of a few horses that are drawn to her outside.
No, for sure. As we pointed out in the pace projector, she's going to have her work cut out for her. I guess the one good sign would be that she really does seem to do her best running when she comes off of layoffs before she tails off for whatever reason. That's not really a strong suit of Robertina Diodoro, who I still would consider the trainer when I'm handicapping a race like this. But she seems to be a mare who goes against his trend because, as I said, all of her best races come right when she comes off the bench, and then the form decline. So if you like her, that would be a positive.
That is a good point. Her victory in the Mistletoe last year was off a similar layoff. It actually was over a sloppy track, and there is some rain in the forecast for Oaklawn Park on Saturday. Not a ton of it, so we'll see how that transpires over the next couple of days. The number 5 is Saddle Up Jessie. She's a shipper for this race, coming in from the Maryland circuit for trainer Brittany Russell. We'll take a look at her last race here when she was a visually impressive winner against optional claiming foes. Craig, this horse was entered in the Go for Wand last week at Aqueduct, and the connections probably took a look at that field, decided it was a little bit on the tough side, and also probably a smart decision in retrospect to scratch from that race because she is an off-the-pace type, and speed was pretty tough at Aqueduct last week, so seems to be finding a better pace situation as she ships down to Oaklawn for this one, and she's another one who has some class questions to answer, but she's really been a revelation for the connection since switching over to dirt, since being claimed for just $20,000 earlier this year, and definitely is in the hands of a good trainer.
It's got to be one of the better claims we saw last year, and her speed figures just keep getting better. She keeps running against tougher and tougher horses, and her speed figures don't put her that far out of this. Brittany Russell does fine. She doesn't ship a lot, but when she does, the horses are usually well meant. So I could see this filly being a serious contender.
Yeah, watching her last couple of races, she's run the turns, especially the far turn, really well and makes big moves around them and just kind of flattens out a little bit late. That was the case 2 back. So maybe the short stretch run could work for a horse like that. The number 6 is Coastal Charm. Let's take a look at her race 2 back when she was achieving her most recent victory in the Iowa Distaff. This was back in the summertime, July, at Prairie Meadows, and she's beating a couple of horses that she'll be facing again here, including Ice Orchid, who she's putting away in the frame right now. Finishing further back was Big Bad Diva. And Coastal Charm, Craig, she's always dangerous when she's able to get to the front end. She had success over this Oaklawn Park dirt course last year. It's coming off a loss last time, but that was against a tougher field at Ellis Park, and now she's been freshened up for the start of this Oaklawn meet.
The negative for me is where she is on the pace projector. She's a filly who does all of her best running on the lead, and it's just hard for me to envision her getting there this time. If she does, she'd probably have to go much too fast to get it. She also hasn't really run speed figures that could put her in the winner's circle.
Yeah, she definitely is a little bit light on speed figures, but she is a horse that has liked to win races and has been successful at this 1 mile distance at Oaklawn in the past. The number 7 is Effortlessly Elegant and definitely going out for a dangerous barn. Norm Cassie had a strong year in 2023, including sending out plenty of winners at Oaklawn Park's meet last season. And this filly, she sort of tailed off a little bit prior to the layoff, though I guess we shouldn't be too hard on her for finishing off the board in the Grade 1 Ashland to get some tough competition. Came off the layoff last time at Churchill Downs, going 6 furlongs, got caught up in a pretty quick pace and had to rush up a little bit after a bobbling start that day. I'm just not sure that her form really points out to her being better going longer, Craig. I know she's got that victory at Oaklawn going 1 mile and a 16th last year, but that race didn't earn much of a speed figure. Maybe she'll be capable of better now that she's had some time to mature at the end of her 3-year-old season.
Yeah, she is just a 3-year-old. So again, she'd need improvement, but it's more likely for her than some others. Another upside is that Norm Cassie is a guy who doesn't have him fully cranked mostly first time out. His start second time off the layoff are better than first when you pull it up in the Timeform US trainer ratings. He's just an 80 first time, all the way up to 100 second time. But that said, I have similar reservations as you. I'm not sure if she really wants to go a mile. And there's also the point that there's other speed in here, and her best races and really her only win have come in wire to wire fashion.
Another horse who has a lot of similar questions to answer is the number 8, Charlie May, another 3-year-old, the one that's done a lot more racing than Effortlessly Elegant to her inside. But the distance, I think, is the big question for this horse, Craig. She tried the 2 turns once at Albuquerque, 2 back, and was beaten by a pretty good horse that day in Flying Connection, but just not really competitive with that foe, and then came back to a sprint last time. She would just have to step up and run a faster speed figure than she ever has before.
Right. She's another one who could be involved in the pace for sure, but just seems to be lacking in overall quality. Has only hit that Timeform US speed figure of triple digits one time, and it would definitely take a big improvement here.
The number 9 is Adeline Julia, and she is the other one of those Sean Williams former Diodoro trainees in this race. And she's stretched out to try the 2 turns for the first time in her most recent start at Delta Downs, sort of that elongated run down the stretch the first time over the very short Delta Downs track. But she was competitive that day in terms of running up with the pace most of the way, was dueling through the early stages, and was pretty game to fend off that rival in the late stages, especially considering that she had been more of a sprinter in all of her prior starts. She ran a big speed figure at Churchill going back to the springtime. Since then, hasn't quite run back to that number, and I think she'd have to do a little better than her most recent route effort against this tougher field.
Adeline Julia always seems to show up. I mean, she's almost always right there at the finish or competing for the win. It's just a matter of, is her best race good enough to win a race of this quality, particularly at the mile distance? As you note, a mile at Delta Downs is quite a bit different than a mile at Oaklawn Park. So she's not really for me, but I wouldn't be surprised if she is part of what I expect to be a fast pace.
The number 10, Ice Orchid, is a horse that we took a look at in that replay that was won by Coastal Charm. That was 4 starts ago in her past performances, and she's been in pretty good form since then, Craig. Can't fault her for losing the Groupie Doll 3 back against tougher foes. And then since then, she won a race at Churchill and then was a narrow loser to Scratch Cat, who has plenty of back class last time. She's coming into this race in pretty solid form. She's run well at Oaklawn in the past, and she's got the right running style for this race. The one problem is the post position, because it's easy to see her getting hung out wide from post 10 with that short run to the first turn.
Yeah, it is very difficult. She faced off a couple times against Lovely Rag last year, was not able to beat that rival. Seems like she's coming in better form, though. I would prefer her, except for, as you note, the post position.
Then another horse drawn far outside is the number 11, Butter Bean. But at least what you can say about her, Craig, is that she's likely just to take back and try to save some ground, potentially at the back of this 11 horse field. And she has done her best running from far back, making those big closing runs. But she's a horse who has been very successful at Prairie Meadows and hasn't necessarily carried that form to other venues very often. So it'll be interesting to see if she can bring that form to Oaklawn Park here. She's definitely one to consider if this pace completely falls apart, but she'd also need to get a little lucky with the trip.
For me, she's a filly you can only really consider if you think the race is going to fall apart. And even then, I would say only for minor position. She's never really improved her speed figures since her 3-year-old season, and that's just not a good sign.
Let's throw up our picks for this Mistletoe Stakes. And Craig, you're going with the number 2, Misty Vale, who probably is the horse to beat in this race, just having faced better company recently. And most importantly of all, she drew a much better post position than some horses who have similar running styles to her.
Yeah, I'm willing to forgive her running against much better competition. She had some bad scenarios with speed bias tracks coming off a slow pace. Looks like she's going to get an ideal setup from that inside post position.
I've got her in the mix. We both have the number 10 Ice Orchid in the mix. I put the number 5 Saddle Up Jessie on top, who Craig, obviously also you like a little bit too. And she's got to answer the class question, stepping up for Brittany Russell. But I like the visual of her last couple of races. Clearly, they've been searching for a spot to try her against Stakes Company, having entered in that graded Stakes at Aqueduct last week. And I think that her running style could fit this race pretty well, and she didn't draw that badly. So number 5 Saddle Up Jessie for me, and the number 2 Misty Veil for Craig in the Mistletoe Stakes, race 9 at Oaklawn Park on Saturday. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.